Before we begin, it's important to state that this presentation is for informational purposes only and does not constitute educational, financial, or legal advice. The depiction of a charter school in this video is a generalized representation based on common practices and does not reflect the reality of every individual charter school. Experiences can and do vary widely. Always conduct your own thorough research when making decisions about education. You've heard the whispers, maybe from a neighbor whose kid is on a 3-year wait list. Or maybe you saw a headline screaming about test scores that defy all logic. They say it's the future of education. Disciplined, rigorous, and results-driven. A place where kids from any background can get an Ivy League level preparation, all on the public dime. Then you hear the other side. The stories of teacher burnout, of kids being pushed out for not fitting the mold. The accusations that these are just private corporations, siphoning money away from traditional public schools and leaving the most challenging students behind. So which is it? Is it a revolution or a racket? What is actually happening inside the walls of America's most controversial educational experiment? For the next hour, we're going to answer that question. We're pulling back the curtain. This isn't about politics, it's not about policy debates. This is your all-access pass to see, feel, and understand what a day in the life of a U.S. charter school is really like, from the first bell to the last. We're going to walk the halls, sit in the classrooms, and decode the methods that produce such polarizing results. By the end of this, you will understand the charter school model from the inside out so you can cut through the noise and decide for yourself. To do this, we're going to spend a day at a composite school we'll call Innovate Forward Academy. It's not a real school, but it's real in a different way. It's a blend of the most common practices, philosophies, and structures found in high-performing, no-excuses charter schools across the country. From the uniforms to the curriculum, what you're about to see is the blueprint that has been replicated in cities from New York to Los Angeles, Houston to Chicago. Our day begins early. Long before the sun has fully risen, the first yellow buses pull up. But this isn't the chaotic, loud arrival you might remember from your own school days. There's an immediate sense of order. A line of teachers and administrators, dressed in business casual attire, stands on the sidewalk, not just watching but waiting. As each student steps off the bus, they are greeted by name, with a firm handshake and direct eye contact. Good morning, David. Tuck in your shirt. Let's go, Maria. You're going to have a great day. Michael, I want to see you leading in class today. This isn't just a greeting. It's the first lesson of the day. It's about professionalism, respect, and setting a high bar from the very first second. The students, or scholars as they're called here, move with a sense of purpose. They walk in single-file lines on designated tape on the floor. Their uniforms are immaculate, khaki pants, a pressed polo shirt with the school crest. There's a rule for everything from how to carry your backpack to the volume of your voice in the hallway, which is typically silence. Can feel jarring, almost militaristic to an outsider. But to the school, this isn't about control for control's sake. It's about eliminating distractions. The philosophy is simple. If a scholar's mind is occupied with hallway chatter or what someone else is wearing, it's not focused on learning. By sweating the small stuff, the tucked-in shirts, the silent lines, the school believes it's freeing up mental bandwidth for what really matters: academics. Instead of scattering to their lockers, all scholars file into the auditorium or gymnasium for the morning huddle. This is the engine that starts the day. For 15 minutes, the entire school comes together. It starts with a chant, a school creed recited in unison. We are resilient. We are responsible. We are the leaders of tomorrow. We are college-bound. It's loud, it's energetic, and it's meant to build a powerful shared identity. Then come the announcements, but they're different here. They aren't about bake sales or football games. They're about celebrating academic achievement. A teacher takes the mic. Let's give a round of applause to the 7th grade algebra class, which achieved 92% mastery on yesterday's exit ticket. The entire room erupts in cheers. Shout out to Brianna for reading 300,000 words this month. More cheers. This is a core tenet of the model. Academic effort is treated with the same reverence and excitement as a game-winning touchdown. It's a relentless public celebration of intellectual grit. The huddle ends, and the scholars transition to their first period class. The hallways remain silent and orderly. There's no loitering, no wasted time. Every single minute of the day is mapped out, and the transition between classes is a science, often timed to the second. Let's step inside a 7th grade English class. The room is bright, the walls covered not with decorative posters, but with student work, college pennants, and vocabulary words. 22 scholars sit at desks arranged in neat rows, all facing the teacher. There is no question about where their attention should be. The teacher, a young, energetic educator, stands at the front. The lesson begins instantly. All right, scholars, eyes on me. Pencils down. We are tracking the speaker. It's a command but also a technique. Tracking means every scholar's eyes are locked onto whoever is speaking, whether it's the teacher or another student. The teacher starts with a rapid-fire review of last night's reading. He uses a technique called cold call. He doesn't wait for students to raise their hands. He calls on them randomly, pulling a name from a cup of popsicle sticks. Jamal. What was the protagonist's primary motivation in Chapter 3? Jamal is expected to have an answer, and to give it in a complete sentence. There's no "I don't know." If a scholar struggles, the teacher doesn't move on. He'll rephrase the question, provide a clue, or ask another scholar to build on a partial answer. The pace is relentless. It's a constant cycle of question, response, feedback, question. There is no downtime. There is no moment to drift off. The intensity is palpable. It's designed to maximize every second of instructional time, pushing the scholars to a level of focus they might not have thought possible. But as the teacher clicks to the next slide, revealing the day's objective, a different kind of pressure begins to build. It's a pressure that underpins every lesson, every chant, and every handshake. A pressure that defines the entire charter school experience. And it all comes down to a single, all-important number. That number is the state standardized test score. For a traditional public school, that number is a report card. It might lead to uncomfortable meetings, maybe some new programs, but the school itself will almost certainly still be there next year. For a charter school, that number is a lifeline. It's the difference between renewal and revocation, between existence and extinction. Because unlike their district-run counterparts, charter schools operate on a contract, a charter, with the state or a local authorizer. And that contract has a performance clause. Fail to raise student achievement, fail to hit those target numbers, and the school can be shut down. Period. This single existential threat creates an environment of relentless, almost fanatical focus. It's the engine that drives the entire model. And at the heart of that model, particularly in the high-performing networks that first captured the nation's attention, is a philosophy known as no excuses. The name itself is a declaration of war on the status quo. It's a belief system, a creed, that states unequivocally, demographics are not destiny. A child's zip code, their parents' income, the color of their skin, none of it should predict their academic success. All children can learn, and it is the school's absolute responsibility to make sure they do. No excuses for the student. No excuses for the teacher. No excuses for the school. It sounds simple, almost like a motivational poster, but putting it into practice requires a radical re-engineering of what school looks and feels like. If you believe there are no excuses, then every single minute of the school day becomes sacred. You can't afford to waste time on logistical friction. Students fumbling for pencils, papers being passed out slowly, transitions between classes turning into social hour. All of that is considered lost instructional time. So you systematize everything. Students are taught exactly how to walk in the hallway. In a single file line, hands clasped behind their backs, eyes tracking the person in front of them. This isn't about control for control's sake. It's about efficiency. It ensures that 25 students can move from one room to another in under 30 seconds, silently, ready to learn the moment they sit down. They're taught exactly how to sit in their chairs, a posture called slant. Sit up, listen, ask and answer questions, nod your head and track the speaker. It's a nonverbal cue that signals engagement. When a teacher sees a room full of students in slant, they see a room full of brains that are switched on. They're taught how to pass papers, how to enter the classroom, how to ask for help, how to agree or disagree with a classmate. These aren't just rules, they are procedures practiced and drilled until they become muscle memory, freeing up cognitive load for what really matters, the academic content. And the content itself is delivered with that same surgical precision. The dominant pedagogical approach in many no-excuses charter schools is called direct instruction. This is not the place for meandering, project-based learning or student-led discovery. The theory is that the students these schools serve are often years behind grade level. They don't have time to discover the Pythagorean theorem. They need to be taught it, explicitly and efficiently. So, a typical lesson follows a strict I do, we do, you do model. The teacher begins by modeling the skill perfectly. I do. They explain the concept, solve a problem on the board, thinking aloud so students can follow their logic. Every step is clear, concise, and deliberate. Then they move to the we do phase. The teacher leads the class through examples together. This is where the call-in response comes in. The teacher might say, "When we multiply two negative numbers, the answer is always," and the class will shout back in unison, "Positive." This isn't just about energy. It's an immediate comprehension check. The teacher can hear if the class is getting it. They can pinpoint who is and who isn't participating. Finally comes the you do phase. Students work independently on a set of problems while the teacher circulates, providing targeted, one-on-one support. The entire cycle might take only 15 or 20 minutes, and it will be repeated multiple times throughout a single class period. It's a system built for speed and mastery. The goal is to close academic gaps that have been widening for years, and to do it fast. Now, the most common criticism of this approach is that it's just teaching to the test. That it's a soulless robotic system designed to produce good test takers, not creative critical thinkers. And from the outside, it's easy to see why. The relentless focus on basic reading and math skills, the constant drilling, the scripted lessons. It can feel more like a training facility than a place of intellectual exploration. But from inside the school, the perspective is entirely different. For the teachers and leaders here, that state test isn't just some arbitrary bubble sheet. It's a gatekeeper. It's one of the first and most significant hurdles that society places in front of their students. A high score on that test doesn't just mean the school gets to stay open. It means that student is on track to pass their high school exit exams. It means they're more likely to score well on the SAT or ACT. It means they have a real, tangible shot at getting into and graduating from a four-year university. To them, teaching to the test isn't a compromise. It's a moral imperative. They see themselves as equipping students with the specific codes and skills necessary to navigate a system that has historically been rigged against them. They believe that you can't get to higher order, creative thinking if you don't first have a rock-solid foundation of fundamental knowledge. You can't write a beautiful, persuasive essay about social justice if you don't know the rules of grammar and sentence structure. You can't discover a new engineering principle if you haven't mastered algebra. And to ensure this mastery is happening, everything is measured. Everything. This is the other pillar of the charter school model. It is obsessively data-driven. At the end of that you do portion of the lesson, students might complete a 2-question exit ticket before they leave the room. The teacher will grade these that afternoon, enter the results into a spreadsheet, and know by the next morning that 85% of their students mastered the objective, but that 5 specific students are still struggling with Concept 3B. That data will determine what happens the next day. Maybe the teacher reteaches the concept to the whole class. Maybe they pull those 5 students into a small group for targeted intervention. This cycle of teach, assess, analyze, and reteach happens daily. Weekly, there are quizzes. Every 6 to 8 weeks, there are major interim assessments that mimic the format and rigor of the state test. The results of these assessments are plastered on walls, data walls, with charts and graphs tracking the progress of every single student, in every single subject. Teachers meet in data meetings to analyze the results, poring over spreadsheets to identify trends. Which questions did most students get wrong? Why? Was there a flaw in the way it was taught? Which teacher is getting the best results in teaching fractions? And what can everyone else learn from them? There is no hiding from the data. It is transparent and it is relentless. For the teachers, this creates a level of accountability that is unheard of in most professions. Their performance is not judged on seniority or on how much their students like them. It's judged in large part by the numbers, by the academic growth their students are making. It's a pressure cooker environment that burns through idealism at an astonishing rate. But it also attracts a certain kind of person. A true believer, someone who sees the data not as a weapon, but as a diagnostic tool. A map that shows them exactly where their students are, and the most direct path to get them where they need to be. This entire system, the high stakes, the no excuses philosophy, the structured routines, the direct instruction, and the constant data analysis, is designed to function like a high-performance engine, with every part working in perfect sync to accelerate student learning. But what happens when a gear grinds? What happens when a student, a child, doesn't respond to the system? In the middle of a third-period math class, with the clock ticking down on another data-driven objective, one student puts his head on his desk. He's not being defiant. He's not acting out. He's just shut down. And in that moment, the entire intricate, data-driven machine is forced to confront a variable it can't easily plot on a spreadsheet. A child's breaking point. The silence that follows is heavier than any noise. For a full 3 seconds, the only sound is the hum of the projector and the frantic beat of 28 hearts. The other students, models of perfect posture just moments before, are now frozen. Their eyes, wide and uncertain, dart from Michael's small, still form to Ms. Albright at the front of the room. This isn't on the rubric. There's no procedure for this in the student handbook. This is a system failure, a human error message blinking in a sea of algorithmic precision. And in this moment, you see the two Ms. Albrights. There's the charter school teacher, the one whose mind is a flurry of calculations. The lesson is now 90 seconds behind schedule. This disruption will impact the class's aggregate focus score, and Michael's individual data point for this assessment block will be a 0, dragging down his weekly average. Her job, her performance bonus, the school's ranking. It all hangs on these numbers. Every second lost is a point she might not get back. But then there's the other Miss Albright, the one who is just a person, a 26-year-old who sees a 7-year-old boy who has simply had enough, the one who recognizes the slight tremor in his shoulders not as defiance, but as the last flicker of a system overloaded. She takes a breath, and the choice she makes is almost imperceptible. She doesn't raise her voice. She doesn't snap her fingers. She simply walks, her soft-soled shoes making no sound on the linoleum, and kneels beside Michael's desk. The other students watch, a captive audience to a drama they feel but don't fully understand. She places a hand gently on his back. She doesn't try to lift his head. She just rests it there, a small anchor in his storm. She murmurs something too quiet for anyone else to hear. He doesn't respond. Without breaking her gaze from him, she raises her other hand and makes a small practice gesture towards the intercom on the wall. It's a signal, a silent call for backup. Within a minute, the door opens quietly and a man steps in. This is Mr. Davis, the Dean of Students, or as the kids call him, the Fixer. He's not an imposing figure, but he carries an air of calm authority. He takes in the scene in a single glance, the teacher on the floor, the boy who has folded into himself, the 27 other children holding their breath. He gives Ms. Albright a slight nod. She rises, her face a mask of professional composure, and turns back to the class. "All right, scholars," she says, her voice miraculously steady, as if the last 5 minutes never happened. "Let's look at question 4. Who can remind me of the first step in solving for x?" The machine whirs back to life. Hands shoot up. The metronome of the curriculum resumes its relentless beat. And as Mr. Davis quietly coaxes Michael to his feet and guides him out of the classroom, the door clicks shut behind them, sealing the disruption away from the data stream. The incident has been contained. But what just happened here is the central, explosive debate at the heart of this kind of education. This is the collision point between the philosophy of no excuses and the messy reality of childhood. The no excuses model, which powers many of the nation's highest performing charter schools, is built on a simple, powerful premise: that poverty and background are not excuses for poor academic performance. It posits that through a combination of high expectations, strict discipline, and more time in the classroom, any child can achieve at the highest level. On paper, it's an intoxicatingly American idea. It's the promise of a true meritocracy, a system that can bypass generations of systemic inequality with sheer force of will and structure. Proponents will point to the undeniable results: schools in the most underserved neighborhoods suddenly outperforming wealthy suburban schools, graduation rates soaring, college acceptance letters piling up for kids who were told their whole lives that college wasn't for them. They argue that this rigorous, demanding environment is an act of love, a way of telling these children, "We believe in you so much that we will not accept anything less than your absolute best. We will not let the world's low expectations of you become your own." They say it teaches grit, resilience, the very skills necessary to break cycles of poverty. But critics, and there are many, see something else entirely. They see a culture of control, not care. They see a system that prioritizes compliance over curiosity. They argue that by refusing to acknowledge the profound impact of trauma, food insecurity, or an unstable home life, these schools are not empowering children, but punishing them for circumstances far beyond their control. They ask, is it really grit you're building when a child is punished for their uniform being untucked because their parents couldn't afford a working dryer? Is it high expectations to demand silent, single-file lines from children who are naturally bursting with energy and noise? Is it teaching resilience to drill a 7-year-old on fractions until he literally shuts down from the sheer, overwhelming pressure? They call it a pressure cooker with no release valve, a system that mistakes silence for learning and obedience for engagement. They point to high rates of student and teacher burnout. They argue that while the test scores might look good, the cost is the child's social-emotional development, their creativity, their love of learning itself. For every success story, they warn, there are countless kids like Michael, the ones who can't conform, the ones who break under the weight of expectations they were never developmentally ready to carry. Kids who don't get celebrated on promotional banners, but are quietly managed, counseled, or pushed out, their data points vanishing from the success narrative. Back in classroom 2B, Ms. Albright is a master of compartmentalization. She is projecting an image of unwavering focus, guiding her students through the rest of the math block. But if you could see inside her head, you'd find a raging debate. She sees the value in the structure. She's seen kids who came to her in September, 2 grade levels behind, who are now catching up, their confidence blooming. She believes in the mission. She has to. But she also can't shake the feeling of Michael's small shoulders trembling under her hand. She wonders what Mr. Davis is saying to him right now. Is he in the reset room, a small quiet space for de-escalation? Or is he in the dean's office, filling out a reflection sheet on his poor choice to disengage from the lesson? The system has a protocol for everything, a flowchart for every infraction. But Ms. Albright knows that what Michael needed wasn't a protocol. It was a moment of grace, a moment to just be a tired little boy. And in this entire meticulously engineered educational ecosystem, that's the one thing there's no time for. The bell is about to ring, signaling the end of the math block and the start of the transition to the next lesson. A transition that has to be completed in under 3 minutes. Silently, perfectly. The machine has to keep moving. And just like that, the gears shift. The sound is less a bell and more a digital chime. A clean, sterile tone that slices through the hum of concentration. Pencils are placed down in unison, not dropped. Books are closed, not slammed. 85 fourth graders rise from their chairs as one. A silent, synchronized wave. Their chairs are pushed in, making a soft, collective scrape against the polished floor. There is no chatter, no last-minute whisper to a friend. There is only movement, purposeful and rehearsed. This is the transition. A 3-minute ballet of compliance. They form a single-file line at the door, bodies perfectly spaced, hands clasped behind their backs or held at their sides in what the school calls a scholar's stance. Their eyes are locked forward, a practice they call tracking the speaker. Even when there is no speaker, only the back of the student in front of them. This is not a suggestion. It is a non-negotiable expectation. A teacher stands at the door silent, holding up a hand with 3 fingers extended. The signal for level 0. Absolute silence. Another teacher stands at the far end of the hallway, a human bookend to this corridor of quiet. The line begins to move. It's like watching a human conveyor belt. Left foot, right foot, on the designated tile line that runs down the center of the hall. No one shuffles. No one drags their feet. No one looks at the art on the walls or glances into other classrooms. To do so would be to break the silent contract. The consequences are small but immediate. A demerit, a check on a behavioral chart, a loss of a privilege later in the day. These are not punishments meant to be cruel. They are designed to be data points, tangible reminders that the system has rules, and those rules are paramount. The philosophy is simple and, to its proponents, irrefutable. Every second spent on distraction is a second stolen from learning. Every moment of hallway chaos is a moment that erodes the academic focus they are trying so hard to build. By eliminating these variables, by turning the very act of walking from one room to another into a structured, silent, and predictable routine, the school believes it is creating a sanctuary for the mind. A place where the only thing a child needs to worry about is the task at hand. There are no social dynamics to navigate in the hallway, no opportunities for bullying, no time for off-topic conversations that might spill into the next lesson. There is only the line, the silence, and the destination. They arrive at the English language arts classroom. The students peel off from the line, one by one, and move to their assigned seats with the same practiced efficiency. Within 90 seconds of the first student entering the room, all 85 are seated, their hands folded on their desks, their eyes on the teacher at the front. The teacher doesn't have to say a word to begin. She simply makes eye contact with the class, a silent acknowledgement that the transition is complete and the next block of learning has begun. On the smartboard behind her is a single stanza from a poem. No author, no title. Just 4 lines of text. Today's objective is written underneath. Students will be able to analyze the author's use of metaphor to convey a central theme. The teacher begins, her voice calm but firm. Read the stanza on the board. Silently. When you have an idea about the central theme, place your thumb on your desk. A beat of silence. Then one by one, small thumbs press onto the wood laminate surfaces. The teacher waits until nearly every thumb is down. She doesn't call on a student with a waving hand. That's not part of the procedure. Instead, she uses a technique called cold call. Her eyes scan the room and she calls a name. David. A boy in the 3rd row sits up a little straighter. Yes, ma'am. What is the central theme of this stanza? David hesitates for a fraction of a second. I think the author is talking about being sad. Like feeling trapped. The teacher's expression doesn't change. David, thank you for your thought. But what is our rule about using the word I think? The entire class responds in a low, unified chorus. Use evidence from the text. Correct, the teacher says, her focus still on David. The text is our authority. Your feelings about the text are not the evidence. Let's try again. Point to a specific word or phrase in this stanza and tell me what it suggests. David's eyes dart back to the board. The pressure is immense. It's not just about getting the answer right. It's about following the prescribed method of intellectual inquiry. It's about depersonalizing the analysis, about treating the text like a math problem to be solved, not a piece of art to be experienced. He points. The line that says, a cage of bone and skin. Good, the teacher nods. What does that metaphor suggest? It suggests, David says, his voice more confident now, that the speaker feels imprisoned within their own body. Excellent. You used a word from the text and explained its metaphorical meaning. That is a text-based analysis. She moves on, cold calling another student, then another, building the analysis piece by piece, like an architect assembling a prefabricated structure. Every student response must follow the same formula. Cite the evidence, then state the interpretation. There is no room for deviation. A student who says, "This poem reminds me of my grandmother," is gently but firmly redirected. That's a personal connection. While those are valuable in life, in this classroom we are training to be literary scholars. Stick to the text. This is the intellectual equivalent of the silent hallway. The goal is to eliminate the messy, unpredictable variables of personal opinion and emotional response. The school argues that these students, many of whom come from backgrounds where they are already years behind, don't have the luxury of undisciplined thought. They need a framework, a replicable high-yield strategy to dissect complex texts and produce the kind of analysis that will be rewarded on standardized tests, in college essays, and in professional life. This isn't about stifling creativity, they would say. It's about building the foundational skills upon which true creativity can later be built. You have to know the rules of grammar before you can write a great novel. You have to understand the formula before you can break it. But as you watch, you can't help but notice the students whose thumbs never quite make it to the desk. The ones who shrink a little lower in their seats when the teacher's gaze sweeps over their section of the room. The girl who, after being corrected for sharing a personal connection, stares at the poem with a blank expression, her spark of engagement seemingly extinguished. The system is designed for maximum efficiency, to move the majority of students from point A to point B as quickly as possible. And by all available metrics it works. Test scores rise. Graduation rates climb. The cost, however, is harder to measure. What happens to the divergent thinker in a system that prizes conformity? What becomes of the budding poet who is taught that their personal feelings are irrelevant to the analysis of a poem? The teacher is now instructing the students to take out their journals. They are not going to write their own poem. They are not going to write about a time they felt trapped. They are going to write a single, perfectly structured analytical paragraph, using a pre-taught template known as the Peel method. Point, evidence, explanation, link. It's a formula, a machine for producing a specific kind of writing. And as the students pick up their pencils to begin, the only sound in the room is the scratching of graphite on paper, each one of them building the exact same argument, in the exact same way. The machine, intellectual this time, grinds on. But that machine, the one of silent focus work, is about to be interrupted. A bell, sharp and digital, slices through the quiet. It's not a signal for chaos, though. It's a signal for the next sequence in the program. Pencils are set down in unison. placed horizontally at the top of the desk. Papers are passed forward, creating a neat stack at the front of each row. Chairs are pushed in, not with a scrape, but with a soft practice thud. The students stand one row at a time, triggered by a subtle hand signal from the teacher. They form a perfectly straight line at the door, hands clasped behind their backs, eyes facing forward. This isn't just the end of English class. This is the beginning of the transition to lunch. And in this school, transitions are not downtime. They are not a break in the learning. They are part of the learning. Every moment is a teachable moment. Every hallway a classroom. Every interaction a data point. The lesson here is order. It's compliance. It's moving as one body, a single organism navigating the arteries of the building with maximum efficiency and zero friction. As they step into the hallway, the silence is the most striking thing. You expect the low roar of a middle school, the chatter, the laughter, the occasional shout. But here, there's only the soft squeak of 200 pairs of identical, school-mandated sneakers on linoleum. They walk on a specific line of colored tape on the floor. Their heads are in a bubble, meaning they cannot turn to the side. Their hands are in a clasp, behind their backs. This is the school-wide protocol for hallway movement. It's not just encouraged, it's enforced. A teacher stands at a corner, clipboard in hand, eyes scanning the line like a drill sergeant. A student's eyes wander for a moment too long to a poster on the wall. A demerit is quietly noted. No words are exchanged. The system corrects itself. The destination is the cafeteria, or as it's called here, the refueling center. The name itself tells you everything you need to know. This is not about the joy of a shared meal. It's about nutritional intake for optimal academic performance. The line moves quickly. Each student picks up a pre-portioned tray. The options are limited, designed around federal nutrition guidelines and efficiency of service. A scoop of chicken teriyaki, a scoop of brown rice, steamed broccoli, a carton of milk. No trades. No special requests beyond documented allergies. And then comes the most jarring part of the day. The students file to their assigned tables and sit down. And they eat. In silence. For the first 10 minutes, there is no talking aloud. This is called mindful munching. The stated purpose is to allow students to focus on their food, to eat without distraction, to refuel their bodies and brains for the afternoon's lessons. The silence is thick, punctuated only by the clinking of plastic sporks against styrofoam trays and the glugging of milk from small cartons. Imagine being 12 years old. Your entire world is social. Your brain is wired for connection, for gossip, for jokes, for navigating the incredibly complex, unwritten rules of friendship and hierarchy. And for the most crucial social period of the school day, you are mandated to be silent. It's a level of control that feels almost surreal. After exactly 10 minutes, a teacher at the front of the room raises a hand. A quiet single clap echoes through the room. This is the signal. Students may now talk. But even this is not a free-for-all. Conversations are to be held at a level 1 voice, a whisper, and only with the person sitting directly next to you or across from you. To speak to someone 2 seats down is a violation. To get up and walk to another table is unthinkable. Teachers patrol the aisles, their ears tuned for a voice that rises above the approved whisper. They are the moderators of this carefully curated social experiment. Now, it is profoundly important to understand the why. This system, which can seem so extreme, so unnatural from the outside, did not arise from a desire to be cruel. It was born from a specific diagnosis of a specific problem. The founders of this and many similar charter school models believe that the traditional American school cafeteria is a hotbed of everything that detracts from learning. It's a place of chaos, of bullying, of social anxiety, of wasted time. By imposing this rigid structure, they believe they are creating an environment of absolute safety and predictability. For a child who comes from a chaotic home, this level of structure can be a lifeline. It's a world where the rules are clear, the consequences are immediate and predictable, and the social landscape is flattened. There are no popular kids' tables because all tables are assigned. There is no anxiety about who to sit with. There is no opportunity for a cruel word to be shouted across the room, because no one is shouting. In theory, this strips away the social static, allowing every child, regardless of their background or social standing, to simply exist and prepare for the next lesson. It liberates them from the tyranny of middle school social dynamics, so they can focus on what really matters: their academic trajectory, their future. But there is a cost, and that cost is what keeps educational psychologists up at night. The messy, unstructured, often difficult social world of a traditional lunchroom is not just a bug in the system. It's a feature. It's where you learn to navigate complex social situations without an adult script. It's where you learn to read subtle cues, to negotiate, to share, to stand up for yourself, to resolve a conflict over who gets the last cookie. It's where you practice being a human being in a low-stakes environment. By engineering all of that messiness out of the day, are we preventing students from developing the very skills they will need to succeed in a world that is not structured, that is not silent, and that does not have teachers patrolling the aisles? The argument becomes one of trade-offs. Are you willing to trade the development of certain soft, social-emotional skills for a guaranteed, measurable increase in test scores and a safer daily environment? This school, and the thousands like it, have answered with a resounding yes. They are making a bet. The bet is that if you can get these kids into college, if you can get them on a path to economic success, they will figure out the social stuff later. The priority, the absolute non-negotiable priority, is academics. Everything else is secondary. The silent lunch is a tool, one of many designed to achieve that single laser-focused goal. As the final 5 minutes of the lunch period tick away, another signal is given. It's time to clean up. In a series of fluid, practiced motions, students stack their trays, wipe their area of the table with a napkin and stand. One by one, table by table, they walk to the trash cans, dispose of their waste, and place their trays on a rack. There is no mess. There is no food left on the floor. It is as clean and sterile as it was when they arrived. They line up at the door, once again in their silent, single-file lines, hands clasped behind their backs. The machine is reassembling. They have been refueled. They have been managed. The social variable has been controlled. Now they are ready for the next phase of the day. The bell rings again, signaling the end of the lunch block. They have 20 minutes before the next academic lesson. 20 minutes for what is, in most schools, the one truly free, unstructured, and sacred part of a child's day. Recess. But in a place this meticulously designed, what on earth could that possibly look like? What does it mean to play inside the machine? The answer, it turns out, is that you don't. You don't play inside the machine. You engage in a pre-approved, adult-monitored, pro-social physical activity. The bell rings, but there's no explosion of pent-up energy. Instead, students line up, again, and are led out to a blacktop that looks less like a playground and more like a training facility. The area is divided by brightly colored cones and painted lines, creating distinct zones. There's a foursquare zone, a jump rope zone, a basketball skills zone. Not a game, mind you, but drills, and a quiet zone for reading or drawing. A handful of adults in bright vests patrol the perimeter, clipboards in hand. They're not just watching, they're facilitating. They are recess coaches. If a child wants to play, they must go to the designated zone for that activity. You can't, for example, take a jump rope into the foursquare zone. You can't invent a new game that combines tag with a basketball. You can't just sit on the curb with your best friend and talk about nothing. That would be unproductive loitering. The goal here, as stated in the school's handbook, is to eliminate conflict, ensure universal participation, and use recess to reinforce positive social skills. And on the surface, who can argue with that? Sounds utopian. No one gets picked last for the team because there are no teams. Bullying is minimized because every interaction is visible, every space is managed. The shy kid who might otherwise be left out is gently encouraged by a coach to join the jump rope line. From a distance, it looks like a perfectly harmonious, well-oiled machine of happiness. Every child is moving, everyone is smiling, everyone is safe. But safety is a funny thing. We often think of it only in physical terms, the absence of scraped knees, black eyes, and hurt feelings. This system achieves that with remarkable efficiency. But there is another kind of safety, a deeper kind, that is being systematically dismantled here. It's the safety to fail, the safety to be awkward, the safety to be bored, the safety to try something ridiculous and have it not work, the safety to have a small, meaningless argument with a friend over a rule you just made up, and then figure out how to resolve it on your own 5 minutes later. This is the hidden curriculum of traditional, messy, chaotic recess. It's where the real social-emotional learning happens. Not the scripted kind where an adult tells you to use your I statements, but the real trial-by-fire kind. Learning how to read a room, how to join a group that's already playing, how to negotiate, compromise, and stand up for yourself. Learning how to deal with the sting of being excluded, and how to develop the resilience to try again or find something else to do. Boredom, that state we try so desperately to engineer out of our children's lives, is the very incubator of creativity. It's in those unproductive moments, staring at the clouds or kicking a loose stone, that the mind wanders and invents. A stick becomes a sword. A patch of dirt becomes a kingdom. A group of kids with nothing but a wall and a ball invents a game with a dozen intricate rules that will be forgotten by tomorrow. In the structured world of the charter school playground, there is no room for this. The stick is a hazard. The dirt is a mess. The new game is a violation of the zone rules. By optimizing recess, they have stripped it of its very soul. They've taken a vital developmental experience and turned it into another period of instruction. The recess coaches aren't just supervisors. They are teachers, and the lesson is compliance. The lesson is that your free time is not truly yours. It is another opportunity for adults to shape you, guide you, and measure you. Think about the long-term implications of this. We are raising a generation of children in environments like this, who have never had to organize their own fun, who have never had to resolve a peer conflict without an adult mediator, who have never experienced the profound self-discovery that comes from being truly, utterly, unsupervisedly bored. What happens when these children arrive on a college campus, where their time is suddenly terrifyingly their own? What happens when they enter the workforce and have a disagreement with a colleague, and there's no coach with a clipboard to tell them how to resolve it? The school would argue that they are preparing these kids for a structured world, that they are giving them the tools to succeed in a system that rewards discipline and focus. And they are not entirely wrong, but they are operating on a dangerously incomplete definition of success. A life without the ability to improvise, to create your own structure from chaos, to navigate complex and unscripted social landscapes, is a fragile life indeed. It is a life optimized for the known, and utterly unprepared for the unknown. And the future is, if nothing else, the great unknown. This philosophy, this relentless drive for optimization, doesn't stop at the playground's edge. It permeates every aspect of the day. Because if you can quantify and structure something as elemental as play, imagine what you can do to something that already lives within a classroom. As the 22 minutes of purposeful physical activity come to an end, the students line up once more. The transition is seamless, silent, and swift. They file back into the building, their heart rates slightly elevated, their social skills theoretically reinforced. They are now heading toward what many people consider the heart of a holistic education. It's the part of the day meant for expression, for creativity, for the subjects that can't be easily bubbled in on a standardized test. I'm talking about the arts, music, the things that make us human. But in a school that worships data and measures success in test scores, what value can a painting possibly have? What is the return on investment of a song? The answer in a place like this is that it doesn't. Not on paper anyway. A painting has no bubble to fill in, no multiple choice answer. A song can't be graded on a 5-point rubric that predicts college readiness. In the ledger book of modern education, the arts are a liability. They are messy, unquantifiable. They are, in a word, inefficient. And in a charter school, where every minute of the day is optimized for performance, inefficiency is the enemy. So you'd expect the art room at Northwood Preparatory Academy to be a sad, forgotten closet. A place with dried-up markers and gray, recycled paper, run by a part-time teacher who's just counting the minutes until the bell. But that's not what you find. You walk down a hallway of silent, focused classrooms, past doors with signs that say Quiet Testing Zone. And you hear it. A low hum. Laughter. And then, as you get closer, the unmistakable sound of creation. You open the door, and the world turns from beige to technicolor. It's a beautiful, controlled chaos. Canvases lean against every wall, splattered with a riot of colors. Clay-dusted students huddle around a potter's wheel, their faces a mask of intense concentration. In the corner, a group is storyboarding a comic book, their excited whispers a stark contrast to the enforced silence of the hallway. This room doesn't feel like a liability, feels like an oasis. And at the center of it all is Ms. Anya Sharma. Ms. Sharma is not your typical teacher. She didn't come through a traditional education program. She was a graphic designer for a major tech firm in Silicon Valley, one of those places with free lunches and nap pods. She made a 6-figure salary designing the little icons you tap on your phone without a second thought. And one day she walked away from it all. Because, as she puts it, she was tired of making things that were designed to be forgotten in 6 months. She wanted to build something that lasted. She wanted to build minds. But building minds in this environment is a battle. Every year, Ms. Sharma has to justify her program's existence. She doesn't present a portfolio of beautiful student art to the school board. She presents a spreadsheet. She's learned to speak their language. She tracks data points you'd never think to associate with art. She runs regressions showing how students who take her ceramics class show a 12% improvement in spatial reasoning scores on their geometry assessments. She presents case studies demonstrating how the discipline of learning a new song on the keyboard correlates with a measurable increase in focus during long reading blocks. She has to quantify the unquantifiable. She has to calculate the return on investment of a soul. It's a heartbreaking compromise, but she does it to protect this space. Because she knows what happens here is more than just a grade. Take a look at Leo. He's a 7th grader, sitting at a table by the window. In his other classes, Leo is practically invisible. He's shy, struggles with reading comprehension, and his test scores place him in the bottom quartile of his class. He's a data point and not a good one. He's the kind of student the system is designed to fix, to remediate, to drill until his numbers go up. But in Miss Sharma's class, Leo is a giant. He's not just doodling. He's creating worlds. On the table in front of him are pages and pages of a graphic novel he's been working on all year. The artwork is stunningly detailed, a mix of American comic book grit and Japanese manga fluidity. His characters have backstories, his worlds have histories. He can't always decode the complex sentence structure in his history textbook, but he can tell you the entire political lineage of the fictional galactic empire he's created. He's not a struggling student in here. He's a world builder. Miss Sharma saw this on day 1. She didn't see a deficit in reading. She saw a surplus of visual storytelling. So she made a deal with Leo's English teacher. Instead of forcing Leo to write a 5-paragraph essay on a book he could barely read, they let him submit a 10-page comic book adaptation. They would grade him on the same rubric: theme, character development, narrative structure. He was just using a different language to show his mastery. The first comic he turned in was, by academic standards, a mess. The spelling was creative, the grammar was a suggestion. But the story was all there. The emotional arc of the main character was more sophisticated than anything his peers were writing in their essays. He understood the subtext. He understood the symbolism. He just couldn't bubble it in on a test. So they kept working. Ms. Sharma taught him about paneling and pacing. His English teacher taught him how dialogue and narration boxes could strengthen his plot. They weren't remediating his weakness. They were building on his strength. Slowly, something amazing happened. As Leo's confidence in his own storytelling grew, so did his analytical skills. He started to see the story in his history textbook. He started to analyze the character development of historical figures. His grades in other classes began to tick upward. Not by a lot, not enough to make him a star data point, but it was real, tangible progress. It was the kind of holistic growth that no test prep software could ever hope to achieve. This is the ROI of art. This is the data that doesn't fit on a spreadsheet. But this year, the fight is harder than ever. The school's overall math scores dipped by 3% last quarter. And in the world of data-driven education, a dip like that is a 5-alarm fire. The administration is under immense pressure from the charter board. They need to show immediate improvement. They need a solution they can sell. And the proposed solution is a new, expensive, AI-powered math curriculum, guaranteed to raise scores. The only problem is, it's not in the budget. So they have to find the money. They have to make a cut. And everyone knows where they're looking. They're looking at the messy, inefficient, hard-to-quantify art program. 2 weeks ago, the school principal, Mr. Harrison, did a walkthrough of Ms. Sharma's class. He's not a bad guy. He's a former math teacher who believes, genuinely, that numbers are the clearest path to success for his students. He sees the world in terms of problems and solutions. And the problem is a 3% dip in math scores. The solution is more time on task for math. He walked through the vibrant, noisy classroom with a clipboard and a frown. He saw students painting, something he viewed as a hobby. He saw students working on a comic book, something he viewed as a distraction. He didn't see spatial reasoning or narrative development. He saw kids who were not practicing their multiplication tables. He stopped at Leo's desk. Leo, lost in his work, didn't even notice him at first. Mr. Harrison picked up one of the finished pages. On it was a dramatic scene. A hero facing down a giant cybernetic monster. The perspective was perfect, the line work was clean, the emotion was palpable. Mr. Harrison looked at it for a long moment. Ms. Sharma held her breath. She saw a breakthrough. She saw a student finding his voice. She wondered, what did Mr. Harrison see? He put the page down, his face unreadable. He looked at Leo, then at Ms. Sharma. "How many instructional minutes are dedicated to this project?" he asked, his voice flat. It wasn't a question about art. It was an audit. He was calculating the cost. He was weighing Leo's comic book against a 3% deficit. And in that moment, Ms. Sharma knew her spreadsheet of data and her carefully correlated gains might not be enough. Because you can't put a number on a story. You can't quantify a kid finding the one thing in the world that makes him feel powerful. And in a school that only values what it can measure, the things that truly matter are the first to be erased. And what gets erased first isn't an art class or a music program. It's the person standing at the front of the room. It's the teacher. To understand this place, you have to understand the people who are drawn to it. They don't come here for the salary or the comfortable hours. They arrive like missionaries, fresh from top universities, burning with a righteous fire to close the achievement gap. They are told they are not just teachers. They are warriors in a battle for social justice. They are told that long hours and personal sacrifice are the price of changing the world. They are sold a story of heroism, and for the first few months they believe it. They pour every ounce of their being into the mission. They arrive before the sun. They leave long after it has set. Their friends in other jobs talk about happy hours. They talk about data-driven instructional strategies and tiered interventions. But slowly, imperceptibly at first, the system begins to grind them down. The heroism they were promised starts to feel a lot like martyrdom. The mission starts to feel like an assembly line. The very passion that brought them here becomes a liability in a system that prizes compliance above all else. Every minute of their day is scripted. Literally. Down to the exact phrasing they are supposed to use to praise a student. "I see you are tracking the speaker with your eyes, Kevin." That is 100%. There is no room for deviation. No space for the spontaneous, magical moments of connection where real learning happens. A student asks a fascinating off-topic question? That's 30 seconds of lost instructional time. A child is crying because their parents fought last night? That's a distraction from the daily objective. The teacher's job is not to inspire. It's to implement. They are not educators. They are facilitators of a pre-packaged curriculum. And the data is relentless. Every single thing is tracked, quantified, and graphed. Student quiz scores, homework completion rates, demerit counts, the number of seconds it takes for the class to transition from one activity to the next. Teachers spend more time inputting numbers into spreadsheets than they do actually planning creative, engaging lessons. Their own performance is boiled down to a single brutal metric: their students' test scores. Their value as a human being, their worth as an educator, is reduced to a number on a chart that is projected for the entire staff to see during weekly data meetings. It's a culture of constant surveillance, dressed up as accountability. Administrators with clipboards pace the back of the room, not to offer support, but to document infractions. A poster is slightly crooked. A teacher didn't use the approved hand signal for getting the class's attention. The feedback is constant and it is rarely positive. It's designed to break you down, to remold you into the perfect, compliant cog for the machine. One former teacher told a story. A 7th grader, a boy who was usually a ball of unfocused energy, had been quiet and withdrawn for days. During a silent reading period, she noticed he was just staring at a blank page. She knelt by his desk and asked him what was wrong. He wouldn't say. She gently pushed and finally, he whispered that his older brother had been arrested the night before. The teacher abandoned the lesson plan. She took him to the hallway and just listened. She let him talk, let him cry. She told him he wasn't alone, that he was a good kid, and that this one terrible event did not define him or his future. It was a moment of profound human connection, a moment that might have changed that boy's life. When her instructional coach found out, she wasn't praised. She was reprimanded. She had left her other 27 students unsupervised for 7 minutes. She had gone off script. She had failed to maximize instructional time. The message was clear. The child's emotional well-being was secondary to the data point. The human story was an inconvenient variable in their equation for success. This is why the average teacher at a school like this lasts less than 3 years. It's a churn and burn model. And it's not a flaw in the system. It's a feature. Young, idealistic teachers are inexpensive. They don't have families yet, so they can work 16-hour days. They haven't been in the profession long enough to question the pedagogy. They believe in the mission until the mission breaks them. And when they inevitably burn out, when they leave the profession entirely, disillusioned and exhausted, There is a fresh new crop of bright-eyed believers waiting right outside the door to take their place. The school runs on two things: data and an endless supply of 22-year-olds who haven't learned how to say no. Think about what this does to the students. Every year, a new face at the front of the room. A new set of rules, a new personality. How can you build trust? How can you form the deep, meaningful bonds with an adult that are so critical for a child's development, especially a child coming from a difficult background? The very stability the school claims to provide is undermined by the instability of its own staff. The no excuses mantra, meant to create a culture of high expectations, fosters an environment devoid of grace. A student's uniform is dirty because their family's water was shut off? Demerit. A child is exhausted because they share a bedroom with 3 other siblings and couldn't sleep? Demerit. They are being taught that their circumstances are not reasons, they are excuses. They are being taught that the system does not care about their story. And this relentless focus on results, on the test score above all else, creates perverse incentives. The curriculum narrows to only what is on the test. Science becomes memorizing vocabulary words for the reading section. Social studies becomes reading passages and answering multiple choice questions. There is no room for debate, for critical thinking, for discovery. It's a process of intellectual force-feeding. The goal is not to create lifelong learners. It's to produce a higher test score than the public school down the street. That score is the ultimate product. It's what they sell to parents, to donors, to the media. It's the metric that justifies their existence and secures their funding. And everything and everyone is sacrificed at its altar. The teachers who stay, the ones who survive, learn to adapt. They become numb. They stop seeing the children and start seeing the data points they represent. They stop trying to connect and start trying to comply. The fire in their eyes dims. They learn to separate their work from their soul, because it's the only way to keep a piece of yourself from being consumed by the machine. But the most terrifying part isn't the pressure from the administration. It's the realization that, in many ways, the administrators are just cogs themselves, answering to something even more powerful and less forgiving. It became clear that the day-to-day decisions, the demerits, the teacher evaluations, the student interventions, weren't just being guided by a philosophy. They were being dictated by something else. Something colder, more calculating. An algorithm. The school wasn't just run like a machine. In a very real sense, it was becoming one. It was called the Adaptive Learning Pathway, or ALP. On paper, it sounded revolutionary. A system that tailors the educational experience to each individual student, minute by minute. If a student was struggling with a concept, the system would automatically provide remedial exercises. If they were excelling, it would offer advanced material. It was the promise of personalized education, delivered at scale. But in practice, it was something else entirely. It was the school's central nervous system, its conscience, and its executioner all rolled into one. Every student tablet, every classroom smartboard, every teacher's laptop was a nerve ending, feeding a constant stream of information back to a central server. It didn't just track right or wrong answers. It tracked everything. The time it took a student to answer a question, the number of times they erased an answer before submitting, which videos they rewatched, which part of a digital textbook they highlighted. It created a shadow profile, a data ghost of every single student, comprised of thousands of tiny, seemingly insignificant data points. This ghost was then analyzed not for understanding but for patterns, for statistical probabilities of success or failure. And the teachers, they weren't just teachers anymore. They were learning facilitators. Their primary job was to enforce the will of the algorithm. Each morning they would log into their dashboard and receive their instructions for the day. The dashboard was a sea of color-coded metrics. Green for students on track, yellow for those at risk of falling behind, red for students in critical need of intervention. But intervention was a chillingly sterile term for what actually happened. It wasn't a teacher pulling a student aside for a heartfelt conversation, trying to understand if they were having trouble at home or just weren't getting enough sleep. No, an intervention was a command issued by the system. Student 1138 is performing 12% below benchmark in algebraic expressions. Assign Module 7B remedial. The teacher's job was to click Assign. Student 24601 has been flagged for off-task behavior, based on an average click rate 22% slower than the class median. Initiate Tier 1 disciplinary protocol. The teacher's job was to log the infraction. Their professional judgment, their intuition, The art of teaching that comes from years of looking into a child's eyes and seeing the spark of confusion or the flicker of understanding, all of it was rendered obsolete. It was inefficient. It wasn't scalable. It couldn't be quantified and put on a chart for the board of directors. The algorithm turned the classroom into a digital assembly line. Students were the raw materials, moving along a conveyor belt of curated content. The curriculum wasn't a journey of discovery. It was a sequence of optimized tasks. The goal was no longer to foster a love of learning, or to create well-rounded critical thinkers. The goal was to produce a single marketable product, a high score on the end-of-year standardized test. Because that score was the currency of the charter school world. It was what secured funding, what attracted new parents, what justified the entire model. And so, the very soul of education was being systematically stripped away and replaced with a relentless data-driven optimization loop. Spontaneity was a bug, not a feature. A passionate debate that took a class on an unexpected but valuable tangent was a pacing guide deviation. A teacher who spent extra time consoling a crying child was falling behind on their required instructional minutes. The system didn't see a child who needed a hug. It saw a data point dragging down the class average for time on task. One teacher, a veteran with over 15 years of experience in public schools before coming to the charter, told a story that perfectly captured the horror of it all. She had a student, a quiet, brilliant girl who was a phenomenal writer. In her essays, she was lyrical, insightful, and wise beyond her years. But she struggled with the system's constant, rapid-fire multiple-choice quizzes. The algorithm, in its infinite wisdom, saw her slow processing time and her occasional wrong answers on these quizzes and flagged her. It diagnosed her with a foundational reading comprehension deficit. The prescription was brutal. The system locked her out of the grade-level literature she loved and instead forced her into a remedial track of mind-numbing digital passages and bubble-in questions. The teacher watched in agony as this bright, creative spark began to dim. The student who once wrote beautiful, imaginative stories was now being drilled, day after day, on identifying the main idea in a paragraph about how to properly wash a dog. The teacher knew it was wrong. This wasn't a learning deficit. It was a learning style difference. It was educational malpractice by spreadsheet. She went to the administration, armed with the students' incredible essays, pleading her case. She explained that the algorithm was misinterpreting the data, that it was crushing this girl's spirit. The principal just pointed to a screen. "The data is the data," he said. "The pathway has an 87% success rate in remediating these specific deficits. We have to trust the model." The teacher was given a choice: enforce the algorithm's prescription, or be flagged herself for non-compliance, which would trigger a professional improvement plan. She was being told to ignore her own eyes, her own experience, her own heart, and to put her faith in the cold, unfeeling logic of the machine. The little girl, meanwhile, stopped writing. She became withdrawn and sullen. The system hadn't fixed a problem. It had created one. It had taken a unique, thriving mind and tried to sand it down to fit into a standardized box. And when it didn't fit, it simply started to break it. This was the true cost of efficiency. This was the dark side of data-driven instruction. It created a system that was technically perfect and morally bankrupt. It was a system that could measure everything about a student except for the things that actually matter: their curiosity, their resilience, their creativity, their humanity. And as the weeks turned into months, it became terrifyingly clear that the school wasn't just using this data to manage its own students. The sheer volume of information being collected, millions of data points per day from hundreds of students, wasn't just sitting on a server. It was an asset, commodity. This wasn't just an educational experiment. It was a research and development lab on a massive scale. And the data being harvested from these children, from their every success and every failure, was being packaged, analyzed, and prepared for a much, much larger purpose. The goal wasn't just to perfect one school. It was to create a product that could be sold, a model that could be franchised, a system that could reshape American education itself. And the children weren't the clients. They were the product. And like any product, they needed to be standardized, packaged, and rated for quality. The metric for that quality control? Standardized test scores. This is the key that unlocks the entire system. When you see education not as a process of enlightenment but as a production line, the obsession with test scores suddenly makes perfect, chilling sense. High scores mean a high-quality product. A high-quality product attracts more customers, more parents, more students. And more students mean more public funding, flowing from the district into the charter school's bank account. This is where the promise of innovation often gets twisted into the reality of optimization. The question stops being, how can we best educate this child? And becomes, how can we most efficiently raise this child's test scores? The curriculum narrows. Subjects that aren't on the test, like art, music, or even social studies, are minimized or cut entirely. Recess is shortened. The day becomes a relentless cycle of test prep, drills, and data tracking. Teachers who entered the profession to inspire find themselves reduced to technicians, executing a pre-packaged curriculum designed to maximize points on a multiple-choice exam. The joy of discovery is replaced by the anxiety of performance. But to truly understand the model, you have to follow the money. It starts with something called per-pupil funding. Every student in a public school district is worth a certain amount of public money, a mix of local, state, and federal funds. When a student leaves a traditional public school to attend a charter, that money follows them. On the surface, this seems fair. But the devil is in the details. Many charter schools, especially those part of large networks, are not run by a local nonprofit board of educators. They are managed by for-profit or nonprofit corporations called charter management organizations, or CMOs. These organizations are the corporate headquarters. They provide the curriculum, the teacher training, the branding, and the back-office services. And for these services, they charge the school a hefty management fee, often 10 to 15%, sometimes more, of the school's entire public revenue. So, a significant slice of the money intended to educate children is immediately skimmed off the top and sent to a central corporate office, which may be in another state entirely. But the real financial genius of the model often lies in real estate. A public school district owns its buildings. A charter school frequently does not. Instead, it leases its facility. And who do they lease it from? In a staggering number of cases, the landlord is a private real estate company that is owned by, or has deep financial ties to, the very same people who run the charter management organization. Think about that for a second. The charter school, funded by your tax dollars, pays rent. That rent, often at above market rates, goes to a private real estate company. That company is owned by the founders or investors of the charter network. It's a perfectly legal way to turn public education funds into private real estate profits. The school can be a nonprofit on paper, but it's funneling public money into a for-profit enterprise through lease payments. They are, in effect, using taxpayer money to pay their own mortgage and build private equity, an opportunity traditional public schools simply do not have. This is the architecture of the business model. It's not a conspiracy, it's just business. It's about creating a system where public funds can be reliably and legally diverted into private pockets. The school itself might be nonprofit, but the ecosystem built around it, the management company, the real estate holding company, the curriculum provider, the testing company, is a web of for-profit interests. And this brings us to the most uncomfortable truth about the charter school movement. It was sold to the American public as a grassroots effort to create innovative, community-based schools. And some of them are. But the dominant, driving force behind its expansion has been a well-funded, politically connected corporate reform movement. It's backed by hedge fund managers, venture philanthropists, and billionaires who believe market principles can solve social problems. They see traditional public schools, with their unions, their local school boards, and their government oversight, as inefficient monopolies that need to be disrupted. Their solution is a marketplace of schools, where parents are consumers and schools compete for their business. In this market, good schools will thrive and bad schools will fail. It's a compelling, deeply American narrative, but it ignores a fundamental reality. A school is not a restaurant. If a restaurant fails, the community loses a place to eat. If a public school fails, or more accurately, is failed by years of underfunding and neglect, the community loses its anchor. The children in that school don't just get a bad meal, they get a compromised future. And what about the students who don't fit the high-performing, no-excuses model? The students with severe learning disabilities, the ones with significant behavioral challenges, the recent immigrants who don't speak English? The ones who are, to put it in business terms, more expensive to manufacture? While charter schools are legally required to accept these students, countless reports and studies have shown that many of them find ways to counsel out or push out the most difficult to teach students. The demerit systems, the strict disciplinary codes, the contracts that parents must sign. All of these can be used to weed out the children who might pull down the school's all-important test scores. And where do those children go? They go back to the traditional public school, the very school that has already lost funding because of student departures. the public school system is left with a higher concentration of the most vulnerable, most expensive to educate students, but with a smaller budget to serve them. It's a vicious cycle that starves the public system and then uses its resulting struggles as proof that it is failing, creating even more demand for the charter alternative. So, when we look at that smiling child in uniform, holding up their perfect test paper, we have to ask a harder question. Is this a picture of educational success? Or is it a picture of successful marketing? Is this school a beacon of innovation? Or is it a triumph of standardization and sorting? The debate over charter schools isn't just about education. It's a debate about the public good itself. It asks us to decide if education is a fundamental right, a shared civic responsibility that we all invest in for the betterment of society, or if it's a commodity, a private good to be bought and sold in a marketplace. The goal of this journey wasn't to tell you that every charter school is bad or every public school is good. The reality is far more nuanced. The goal was to pull back the curtain on a powerful and often misunderstood force in American society, to show you the difference between the promise and the business plan, to reveal that the clean, orderly, high-achieving school you see in the stock footage might be built on a foundation that is far more complicated and far more troubling than you ever imagined. The real test isn't handed out in a classroom. It's the one we all face right now. To look at this system with all its complexities and contradictions and decide what kind of future we want to build for the next generation. A future of competition or a future of community. A future driven by profit or one driven by potential. The final grade is still out on that one, and it's a test we can't afford to fail.